So, ladies and gentlemen, the directors of the Russo brothers, basically the directors of Endgame, Captain America: Civil War, some good stuff in Marvel to a degree, anyway, have come out and basically said Marvel's issues are not due to superhero fatigue, but a big generational divide about how you consume media. This is such nonsense, doesn't make any goddamn sense, and it's a very, very funny interview and very, very funny article. Is there necessarily superhero fatigue? To a degree, potentially, but it is also terrible movie fatigue and people not having the funds to just frivolously spaff their money up the wall on nonsense. So people are more discerning now. So it's a combination of things, but it's certainly not what the Russo brothers are claiming. And this is very, very comical. So what are they saying? This is how it's all framed, by the way. Marvel had a tough 2023 with two flops, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania and the Marvels. So they're framing it as 2023 flops. That's the beginning of the end for Marvel, right? What's going on? And then it says this. So speaking with Games Radar, the director said that Marvel's current issues boil down to the changes in how people absorb media. It's a Hollywood-wide issue, not just a Marvel one. And they say the following. I think it's a reflection of the current state of everything. It's difficult right now. It's an interesting time. I think we're in a transitional period and people don't know quite yet how they're going to receive stories moving forwards and what kinds of stories that they're going to want. Right? There's a big generational divide about how you consume media. There's a generation that's used to appointment viewing and going to a theatre on a certain date to see something, but it's aging out. Slow your roll, son. 2023 had some Marvel movies which did really well as well. It wasn't that the generation just skipped in that 1 year, mate. What are you talking about, you dunce? This is what I'm talking about. Make no mistake, I reckon the Russo brothers will probably come out and be like, oh, we're doing a Marvel movie soon, or we're doing a superhero movie or something like that. There's a weird vested interest in this. And it says this, meanwhile, the new generation are, I want it now, I want to process it now. They're moving on to the next thing, which they can process while doing two different things at the same time. You know, it's a very different moment in time than it's ever been. And so I think everyone, including Marvel, is experiencing the same thing, this transition. And I think that really is probably what's at play more than anything else. No, it's not a transition. It's the fact that everyone is feeling what has become known as the Grand Awakening, or what I've just called the Grand Awakening, which is people, normies, becoming very acutely aware that they're being lectured in all the movies they're watching. So they're choosing not to watch them anymore. So anyway, there's more. It says memes and headlines with nobody reading past 2 sentences. This is apparently what the new generation does. So everything's 100 characters or less, or 10-second videos on social media you swipe through. I think that the 2-hour format, the structure that goes into making a movie, is over a century old, and everything always transitions. So there is something happening again, and that form is repetitive, but it's hard to reinvent that form. And I think this next generation is looking for ways to tell their own stories that service their own sort of collective ADHD. So apparently there's no superhero fatigue. Apparently it's just fatigue in general. The superhero fatigue question was around long before the work we were doing. So it's sort of an eternal complaint, like we always used to cite this back in our early days for superhero work. People used to complain about Westerns in the same way, but they lasted for decades and decades and decades. They were continually reinvented and brought to a new heights as they went on. What do you think of all of this nonsense crap?
I mean,
some of their...
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Culture.
No. Go.
I was gonna say some of their points are not wrong, but they're not. I don't know if I'd apply them necessarily to superhero films as I would just films in general, right? I mean, and the audience in general, because I mean, yes, they're not wrong that the younger audience doesn't consume the same way. They don't go to the same kind of movies. Tarantino and Scorsese were right, even regardless of how many people want to piss and moan about it. These superhero movies are not cinema. And kids don't know what true cinema is unless they actually seek it out, or they were taught how to really kind of to watch a film. You almost have to have been taught by your parents now how to really watch movies, it feels like. Yeah. And these folks are not wrong, because we've also seen this with, the stuff that Film Thread had put out there with Pixar and the Disney stuff. And we're finding out that people in that company themselves have not even seen like Snow White and Cinderella or Pinocchio or even 101 Dalmatians. It's like, how do you work for Disney and not have ever seen the original classics? But these kids just don't. They're old timey. They're out of date to them. They're whatever, insert their excuse here. And I feel like they do the same thing with films. And unless it's a IP driven thing that they know, they don't care. Like, these kids were raised on Harry Potter and Marvel. That's what Tarantino said, and he's right. Like, they wouldn't know what to do with one of his films or Taxi Driver if you put it in front of them. Now, Joker, on the other hand, which is basically Taxi Driver and King of Comedy mixed together with the Joker, they can understand that. But now you show them Taxi Driver and then you show them the Joker, they're not gonna like Taxi Driver. Right? It's just because they're not gonna be able to find a way to relate to it. And it's sad. There is this disconnect there. But I do like that we're seeing a whole generation of kids now, especially the Zoomers, that are going back and discovering stuff for themselves. Right? Like, my kid is one of these in this generation where I'm proud of a lot of the stuff that, I may have sent him and started him down the path of certain things, but he picked up on a lot of it on his own. And that's what these kids are doing. That's why vinyl is on the uptick. That's why physical media is kind of starting to make a comeback a little bit, because these kids want to discover these things on their own. So fingers crossed things will get better, but I don't think there's such a thing as superhero fatigue. It's just whether or not the movies are good or not. And I got to remind people, Marvel spoiled us, right? Remember, before Marvel, 90 or at least 75% of the superhero films that came out were shit. Just remember that. They were all garbage usually. Like, for every X-Men we got or Spider-Man we got, we'd get a dozen Tank Girls or Judge Dreds or something like that. So, like, there's only a few movies like The Crow that really people hold dearly from that era.
Right.
What?
What?
What'd you say?
What?
I said there's only few films like The Crow and stuff like that that people actually liked from that era. That's what I was talking about.
All right, back to my.
What did you
problem.
say, Mr. H? I didn't hear what Mr. H said even.
I said Judge Dredd's great.
Oh.
I love Judge Dredd.
I am the law.
Yeah. Plus Rob Schneider's in it. Really quick.
Rob Schneider's in Judge Dredd.
That interaction was the best I've ever. So what? Would you say?
If you meant Dredd, I can understand. I didn't hear what you said. That's all.
How did? Okay, let's try this again. Okay, so the biggest problem here is it's all your fault. Again, it's just a different way it's your fault. And that's the biggest problem I have with the way these directors and everybody present information.
That's a problem.
It's like, look, it's your fault because you don't consume media right, or you can't decide how you're going to consume the products that we make. No, everybody wants to go to a theater. Young people like to go to a theater. How do I know? There's young people at theaters all the time when something good is in the theater. It comes down to making good films and making intriguing stories happen and not filling it full of lectures and other baloney sausage. So, like I said, I've got a video coming out about this in 2 hours, and it talks specifically about this, and I go on and on about it in different ways. But the Russos aren't singular in this. As Tom pointed out, we've been hearing that these movies are very cookie cutter and uniformly made, and now they've been destroyed even in that sense because they feature a bunch of garbage. So, I feel like the biggest loss here is the loss of competent creatives. We haven't had one in a long time. I look, we've got, we got 2 more of these at least to endure. Because I imagine Deadpool and Wolverine will be tolerable. After that, though, you're going to get these other 2 ones that they plan. You got the Captain Baloney Sausage, Brave New whatever, and then you have Thunder Cunt coming out or whatever it is.
Yeah, the Thunderbolts.
No, that's what I said. Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah. Demonetized. Well,
why?
I don't have much to say on this. I did a whole video, and I was just discussing how people are aware of what's going on now. People are aware of being lectured to constantly. That there is a grand awakening occurring in the normies, and once the normies switch on to things, people switch off, and that's what people are doing. So you can't sit there and claim that there is a generational divide
No.
in the same year when some were received well and some were received poorly doesn't add up, doesn't make sense. Your logic don't compute, mate.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's funny nonetheless, but worth taking a
I don't.
look at.
Now, when it comes to Marvel, clearly it's the writing, it's the execution. Even
Mm.
Hemsworth is out there admitting that he turned Thor into a joke. I mean,
That's
well,
my
yeah.
next
What did you
topic.
guys expect?
We'll get to that.
Oh, well, there you go. So
Yeah. I wonder if another person has a thought or two.
I was gonna. Okay, yeah.
Nikki,
Nick, do you have any comments on this superhero fatigue article from Variety, my dude?
Not a whole lot to add other than what Culture and Tom and yourself were saying. I'm in agreement that it's not about the superhero fatigue. It's about bad movie fatigue. So like
Yeah.
if you go back to like when Game of Thrones was hot, and people were tuning in every single week for an hour long, and then when it's over, people are wanting more. They don't want to wait for a year to see the next one. The thing is, if you just keep giving good content, that's drawing people in, people are going to keep coming back. I guarantee you, if they come out with a new MCU film that's got Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans as Cap and Iron Man in it, all of a sudden it'll people will come back in, and that one movie will do $1 billion, and then they'll go back to this other stuff, the Marvels, Thunderbolts, whatever, and then they'll all flop.
Yeah, I can believe that. Can absolutely believe that. I think what we'll do now, though, we will shuffle on.